At the Mitch Daniels School of Business, we are building the future of business.
Former Purdue president Mitch Daniels forging his legacy on the West Lafayette campus. A new $168 million business school now under construction that will bear his name.
Introducing our bold new vision. More than a building, it's a bridge between business and technology. Designed to nurture the next generation of world changers.
Mitch Daniels, his vision on how the new business school named after him will stand apart, and his take on a wide range of other topics, including the state and cost of higher education, the evolution of college athletics, and tariffs on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And I'm pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by former Indiana governor, former Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels. Mitch, how are you?
I'm fine, Gary.
Great to see you. Great to catch up with you. You, quote unquote, retired, stepped away from your role at Purdue. It's been what, about 2 years?
2 years.
You don't strike me as the kind of retiring type. What have you been up to these days?
I have some business involvements. I'm helping a pro-freedom nonprofit here in town called the Liberty Fund. I've written a book that may or may not ever see the light of day. So I found ways to keep occupied, but it is different.
Now, the most important thing, are you able to get out and play a little more golf?
I have played a little more. I won't say any better, but I have played a little more.
That's good. That's outstanding. Well, about a month ago, ground was broken for the Mitch Daniels School of Business on the campus of Purdue University. That is a big project on a number of levels. I want to talk about that. But first of all, for you to have your name on that building, what does it mean?
I argued with the board. It's a rare lapse of judgment on the part of the Purdue trustees, but obviously it's something that I'm deeply gratified about. And I was already very, very committed to the project as we launched it back while I was still there. But this makes me even more determined to help out any way I can, make sure it's the great success that it seems very likely to be.
This is a big project on a number of levels. First, just from the physical nature, the building itself, I think initially it was a $168 million project. Talk about the building. I know it's going to be state of the art. It's going to really be an environment conducive to learning in this modern day age.
I will, since you ask. My view has always been to be careful about constructing buildings and so forth, but Purdue's growth has required a lot of that in across our disciplines. We grew the student body 30% during the years I was there. It's really now the biggest school in the Big Ten or close to it, and so that necessitated more space and the interest. I'm very encouraged. The interest in studying business is a big part of that. And we're just engulfed in applications from outstanding young people from within Indiana and without. And so, yes, we needed more room anyway. And since the trustees and I had agreed that this would be the next big strategic move for Purdue, not only to get bigger, but to differentiate our school and make it distinct in certain ways that we thought would be helpful to today's students. The building was a necessity, and I think the people who have designed and imagined that did a great job.
What do you think's driving that interest in business education?
It's a really interesting question, and I guess you'd have to ask the young people, but I think it's very, very encouraging. Part of the special character that we hope to create at our school is a little better sense of history, of competing economic theories. We want our students not only to be able to read a balance sheet and create a spreadsheet and analyze business in that way, but really to have some sense of how growth and opportunity and jobs happen in this world, what systems are good at producing them, what aren't. And so I hope that they'll, and the early indications, by the way, are that when they encounter a curriculum of that kind, in addition to the more technical aspects, they really like it.
Yeah.
And so we're very very encouraged by the early reception to that part of the Purdue Business School education.
Talk about how the Daniels School of Business will differentiate itself from the others. I know, looking at some of the background, the integrated business and engineering degree program, some STEM elements, science, technology, engineering, and math. How will the new Daniels School of Business be different?
You just named, I think, a principal differentiator as one of the nation's premier STEM schools now. Of that much larger student body, something like 70% at Purdue are majoring in a scientific or technological discipline. And for our business school, this is a huge opportunity to prepare and send into the economy young people who have been trained to work in and eventually lead highly technological businesses, which increasingly are the ones that create all the value. And so, yes, integrated degrees in engineering and business, computer science and business, hard sciences and business, we think will give them a real special edge. And the second characteristic I would mention is that we also are going to make certain they have, unlike a lot of business school students, a good grounding in the liberal arts. They will have read some history, economic and otherwise, some great literature. They'll have to write a little more because, Gary, in my years at Purdue, I heard over and over from businesses, boy, do we love your graduates. They really are well prepared and they have a good work ethic. One thing, we wish they could communicate a little better what they know and have learned. And so we are stressing that too. And once again, the early reaction from the students as we ask them for their take on all this is that they really like that. It's a little different than they expected, a little different than what they have had on their way to Purdue.
Yeah. As you look at some of the other elements, I know there'll be a presence at Purdue University in Indianapolis as well. And talk a little bit about how Purdue is integrating that new school with the private sector in Indianapolis, how important that is. I know High Alpha, there's going to be a presence there at High Alpha.
Really an important question. In deciding to extend the Purdue campus, and Purdue in Indianapolis is not, as you know, a separate or a regional or in any way a different institution. It's part and parcel of Purdue at West Lafayette. The faculty there and the students there are meeting the very same standards. And it had two, I would say, we had two principal objectives. One, I wanted to continue to grow Purdue, but we really had reached at something over 40,000 undergrads, I thought, capacity to have the kind of livable, walkable campus we've always had there. So here's a way we can offer a Purdue education to more young people without that capital expansion. And then, secondly, the appetite in the central Indiana business community for more of the kind of graduates Purdue turns out, engineers and computer scientists and all those disciplines, was really apparent to me for some time. And absolutely the goal here is that the students who spend maybe not their whole 4 years, maybe just 1 or 2 of their Purdue years in Indy, will have internships and job opportunities in a strong economy that's looking for just that kind of young talent.
That sparks another question I had. Obviously, Purdue sends graduates to companies and organizations around the globe, but do you anticipate, I sense you want the impact of the Daniels School of Business to have impact here in Indiana, in the Indiana economy?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we've been about all the years at Purdue and in the job I had before that. Yes, a not so secret part of the agenda here really is brain gain. Something like half of the students who are going to be studying in Indianapolis or spending part of their Purdue experience here will be from somewhere else. And I want Indiana employers to snap them up. We do know that the single best predictor of where a person will spend her or his working life is where they take that first job. And so if that first job's here with us, this is a great opportunity. I think we're already seeing it, by the way, to capture some great talent who came to Indiana for the benefits of a Purdue education and have discovered this is a pretty good place to make your life.
More broadly, the new setup in Indianapolis with IU and Purdue and separate campuses. How I know you think there's great opportunity there. How do you sense it's rolling out now?
I think very, very well, and I hope IU feels the same on their end. I think that IUPUI served very, very well for a half century in a mission that was well suited maybe to the time of its inception. But, it was a confusing arrangement. People from elsewhere couldn't understand what it was. Also, as I said, at least on the Purdue end, we've been eager to lift up the standards here to those of West Lafayette, which have been rising steadily over the years. And so I hope that the clearer identity that Purdue has here and now, and IU has the same opportunity, will be good for both institutions.
As you look at, you talked about the brain gain in getting more students, graduates in that Indiana pipeline. What's your sense of where the Indiana economy is today? Obviously, you're a former governor, business executive. You've had such great perspective on the Indiana economy over the years. As you look at where things are now, a lot of change in this newer economy. How do you think Indiana stacks up from a competitive standpoint?
I think really well. I'm very bullish about it. I mean, first of all, look at the facts. We have very, very low unemployment. We have in-migration. If you look at the recent census data, not as many as I'd like, but thousands of more people moving into the state than out of the state. The best such record really from Iowa to Maine. And so that's a very positive indicator. All the most recent ratings, once again, show Indiana alone outside the Sun Belt and the far West as a great business climate with a competitive, rules of the road, taxes and regulation and all of that we spent a lot of time working on and building. So I really like our chances. And, I think we have a pro-growth leadership in state government still, and I expect good things.
Do you anticipate taking let's say, an active role or in the School of Business? Do you anticipate to being somewhat hands-on or hands-off?
My attitude toward this is I'll do absolutely everything I'm asked to do, but I won't invite myself in. And I've been asked to do a number of things. I'm happy to do them. I've certainly been a part and will, I'm sure, of one-off programs and conferences that they've had there. Just last week was at one. It's been asked whether I want to teach a course. I'm not sure I'm going to do that, but I'll think about it. But certainly, episodically, if I can, I love, and you remember how much I loved hanging with students there for all those 10 years, and any chance to do that, if it seems useful to them, I'm glad to do.
I wanted to ask you one more question before the break, and that is, you seem to really enjoy being a university president. I mean, lots of challenges, to be sure, in this day and age, but you seem to enjoy it. Is there anything in particular you miss from not being in that role?
Oh, the mixing it up with students, which I did on, a constant basis there. That's certainly part of it. Being part of a community of scholars, I think we felt that we had great momentum as a university. We were increasingly written up as an exception to some of the problems of schools that were overpriced, not delivering a high quality and high rigor education. I think that we had great morale at Purdue. It was fun to be a part of that. So, yes, I do. But, Gary, the place is in great shape and in great hands. I've always felt and said that succession management's the final exam. If you're given a position of very high responsibility, you ought to do what you can to make sure that that you're what you've done there it gets better after you leave. And I think that's the case at Purdue. I'm very excited about everything happening up there.
Well, yeah, and one more follow-up to that, and you mentioned how Purdue is positioned now. Obviously, from the Daniels School of Business to any number of projects, the physical appearance and look of the campus has changed dramatically, among many other things. How do you view Purdue's opportunity now as you look to the next 5, 10 plus years?
I think it's great, but it's that's to some extent that's a function of the fact that higher ed is headed for it's in a tough position now and headed for more. There are fewer 18-year-olds. We haven't had a lot of children in this country, and so there are fewer people going to be looking at higher ed. Young people today, and I think they're quite appropriately, are being a little more questioning as to whether a bachelor's degree is really the best course for them. And so now, in such an environment, a school that has put itself in the position I think Purdue has in terms of value and quality, I think can really prosper. I can remember saying to the state of Indiana during recessionary times, these are the times that separate the best, most competitive enterprises from those that are less so. I think Purdue's in sort of that position today. You're seeing a shakeout in higher ed, and that's probably going to accelerate. But I think that only may play to the benefit of schools with the clear qualities and again, value that Purdue, I believe, represents.
Much more with Mitch Daniels. We'll talk a little bit more about the state of education, state of higher education, and a few other things when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America are men and women building roads and bridges to get Hoosiers where they're going today and a new energy infrastructure that will keep Indiana competitive tomorrow. LIUNA's over 12,000 statewide members also grow local economies, earning good union wages, shopping where they live and work, and paying taxes. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is former Indiana governor, former Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels, and ground just recently broken on the new Daniels School of Business on the campus of Purdue University. Mitch, right before the break, you talked about some of the challenges facing higher education. What's your view? Because there are challenges, certainly, and some opportunities too, I assume. What's your take on the state of higher education?
I think it's at a moment of reckoning, and I guess I'm surprised it took as long as it did. But and this is quite apart, by the way, from the pressure that the federal government has begun to put on higher ed, much of which I think is entirely warranted. Mm-hmm. Some I think goes over the line, such as threatening schools' tax exemption and so forth. But the market itself, the marketplace of young people and their families, has become much more skeptical and I think rightly demanding that higher ed demonstrate that it's worth what it costs, and that it's the degrees it confers really provide the sort of launch in life that they're supposed to. And so in that environment, I hope that the sector steps up. It's very important that it do so. This has been a competitive advantage for the United States. We want it to remain that, having the best universities in the world, doing the best research in the world. And but some other schools, I believe, have failed to measure up to that responsibility over recent years. It was just too easy to keep raising prices and letting standards become lax, letting viewpoints become homogenous, and so there's some repair work that's necessary. And I hope now the sector will get serious about it.
You mentioned threatening tax exempt status at some institutions. What about the talk, and it's not new, it's been talked about for a while, but of abolishing the Department of Education?
And honestly, we could do without it now. It would take some work. Congress would have to agree. I doubt that they can go that far, but I do think that much of what that department does is not only been of no value, but counterproductive. I can just tell you many of their dictates and mandates and red tape requirements didn't really enhance anybody's education. So I think it was overdue, like much of the federal government, for a house cleaning. The student loan program was a complete disaster. The federal government nationalized it, took it over. Under President Obama, we were told it was going to make money for the federal government, turned into a huge sinkhole of cost, and not to mention just the difficulty that the individual students had in dealing with it. So a lot of change is very much in order there. Whether there's a department left at the end, maybe secondary.
Speaking, and you mentioned cost, which obviously is a big issue in education these days and has been for a while. You certainly got a lot of national headlines for freezing tuition at Purdue, which I think has continued on. I think it's 14 consecutive years in terms of doing that. As you look at that, the impact, do you think that has contributed maybe in any way to the increase in enrollment that you talked about earlier?
Gary, we know it has. We survey students as to why they chose Purdue or why they didn't, and right behind recognized national quality of education, our policy of restraint and affordability, was clearly a contributing factor to a tripling of applications over the last 10 or 15 years. And so it's a story that's been told often, but the fact that tuition and fees for all students, not just some, are the same now as they were in 2012, is a point of great differentiation for Purdue. You and I have discussed it over the years. When we started, I had no idea, first of all, that we could extend it as far as Purdue has. Yeah. But secondly, I thought that schools that didn't begin to show some restraint, some concern for the burden that high tuitions and fees were imposing on families would run into trouble. I was wrong about that. Most of the sector continued raising prices right through the teens, and only recently are you starting to see some real pushback. But in the process, that left Purdue as a very unique, with what every marketer, dreams of, a unique selling proposition, something that is true of you and what you're offering that's different than the rest of the competition. So happy about that part.
You mentioned earlier the value of an education, value of a bachelor's degree, and you've, I think, been outspoken on that as well. And as you look at that and the options, zero in on Indiana, I guess, here in the Hoosier State, and the ability to get a 4-year degree at great universities, a 2-year associate's degree, and go into some good paying jobs in the manufacturing sector, let's say, or some other area. How do you see that landscape, kind of the culture here in Indiana when it comes to a bachelor's degree or just higher education in general?
Indiana remains a state with mediocre percentage of its working age population holding a bachelor's degree. Some people think that's the barometer. I don't necessarily, in terms of the quality of a workforce, but it is an important indicator, and we would hope to see it increase. We have a great network of schools of differing characteristics, and so there is a school really for every student who wants to go that route. Not everybody should try to be a Purdue University at the top of the STEM totem pole and so forth. But the Uh, and I want to stress, that Indiana has maintained its commitment, its financial commitment to public higher education in a way that very few states have. We were right near the top even during the recession when it was so difficult to fund the state government.
Yeah.
And so that's continued. So credit to the legislature, to the governors who have followed me in that job. If we still have work to do to get our overall education level up, it's not for lack of commitment. Indiana has certainly demonstrated that.
Certainly, athletics are a big part of the college scene, and the cost of especially big-time college athletics are a big issue. Your take, I know you've been opinionated, and lots of people have opinions on the current state of big-time athletics with name, image, and likeness, and the transfer portal, and how that's truly changed the landscape of collegiate sports, which now, and I think you've written about this, really, you blow the smoke away, it's professional sports.
It is. I don't think anybody pretends it's anything else anymore. We're talking now at the Division I level and the most visible level. But it's a fact of life. It's commercially going to be successful. It's going to be very entertaining. What it isn't, by any fair definition, is college sports. I've written recently that if 40, 50, 60 major universities want to basically sponsor professional teams, that's their right. I don't understand why they get a tax exemption for that. You can't really claim that what's happening in the world you just described, players transferring schools 3 and 4 times, being paid extravagant amounts of money, sometimes more than they would earn as a first-year professional. You can't really pretend that has anything to do with education, and we give the tax exemption for providing education.
Yeah.
So it's a decision each school has to make. I do really worry about the implications, though, and what it means to the smaller schools who are struggling right now to maintain the genuine amateur athletics that are such a part of college life at smaller institutions. The fallout as the money goes to the revenue sports, the fallout on on lesser sports and women's sports, going to be very, very difficult to navigate. And so the courts have spoken, sports journalists have spoken. I guess the public has spoken that this is what they want to see. But there are going to be consequences of this that I think most people are going to agree are unfortunate.
And no one knows, obviously, but where do you see this going? I mean, the talk of, student athletes becoming employees and unionizing and all kinds of crazy things. Where do you see this going?
That's been the game from the beginning. The people who brought the original lawsuits, what they really hope is that this will evolve such that since nobody else under antitrust law, not the NCAA, not the super conferences, since nobody else is, as far as the law has progressed so far, no one else is going to be permitted to limit what a young person can earn.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, the only way to have some limits and some sanity here is to unionize these paid employees, and that's what they now clearly are, and have a bargaining agreement like the rest of the professional leagues do. So it could wind up there. One way or another, I think it's not unlikely that there'll be a further segmentation. We've always had different divisions in college sports. You could have yet another one where the schools that really want to play professional football and basketball will go off on their own, and the others fend for themselves best they can.
Yeah. I want to ask you a couple questions before we wrap up on some of the things going on at the national level. Among them, tariffs. And obviously a huge issue, and the impact has got the attention of lots of folks, obviously here and around the globe. Where do you see this How do you see this playing out? The Trump administration certainly feels as though it's going to turn out great. A lot of other folks are not quite as confident.
It depends what the real intentions are here. I said to an audience the other night, I don't know, don't pretend to know whether this is tactical or strategic. If it's tactical, meaning that you had tried to get the attention of trading partners, get them rather quickly to some new lower barriers, lower tariffs and other non-tariff barriers, and you're successful in doing that, that could be a very good thing. Mm-hmm. And if the idea is to rally partners to confront China with the biggest abuser and the biggest problem we have here, I could understand that. Now, if it's strategic, in other words, if the administration, the president, really believes that this is the best way to structure an economy long term, then I think it's going to end very, very badly. And all I would say about the course I hope they're on, that they really are sincere and will be effective in getting some deals, bilateral or otherwise, that they find satisfactory. I hope it happens quickly because the damage has already started. I'm talking to Indiana small businesses in particular, small ones, who were immediately put up against the wall when they can't get the inputs that they need to make whatever they make, or they can't get the products that they've been distributing successfully. So I very much hope that it's a gambit and that it works, but that it does so sooner rather than later.
You certainly have a reputation for being a guy who's 100% behind government efficiency. President George W. Bush affectionately nicknamed you the Blade for your budget cutting prowess. As you look at DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and how that is playing out, on one level, you're talking about getting rid of waste and fraud, but there are those who certainly feel that the process may be not quite right. Your take.
I'm glad they launched the initiative, and I thought it was useful, certainly at the outset. The public really needs to, as people say, look under the hood here, and you'll see, I've said so often, you'd be amazed how much government you'd never miss. There's just so much of what the federal government does it should never have done in the first place, or it no longer needs to do, or it's nice to do, and we just can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so something that illuminated that, surfaced some of the most flagrant examples, I thought had a lot going for it. Now, I think it was a big mistake to throw around grandiose numbers, 2.6 trillion, all this sort of thing. They had no chance of achieving. Only Congress can really get at the big numbers. And so I thought that they made the classic mistake of overpromising. And now you're seeing that, they've done a few things around the edges, but there's just limits to what they legally and operationally can get done without Congress doing its job, which it's been, defaulting on now for decades, and threatening us all with, debts that we'll never be able to, that we're going to deposit on our children and grandchildren. So, a very useful starting point. But no one, I think, anymore imagines that it's the answer in any big way to this very serious fiscal dilemma that we put ourselves in.
Final question for you to kind of bring it back home, if you will. We are in the month of May, the Indianapolis 500, such an amazing Indiana tradition. And Purdue's role with the 500, with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, has been, many, many years in such a rich tradition. As you look at that connection with Purdue and just the tradition of the 500, the month of May, how special is that to you?
Yeah, such a source of pride. When viewers go, as I encourage everyone to do, to the fantastic new IMS Museum, the opening videos, you're going to see Purdue in 3 or 4 places, usually the band and so forth. And Purdue has, by the way, a big part of the Purdue in Indy that we talked about is a motorsports degrees. Young people preparing themselves. Classic example to lead businesses in the very technologically complex world of motorsports, and so that there are a lot of connections there on the academic side too. So yeah. Nothing beats May in Indiana, and it's always been fun that Purdue was so much in the middle of it.
Yep. Well, Mitch Daniels, it has been great as always in catching up with you. We certainly are looking forward to watching the construction and the completion of the Daniels School of Business at Purdue as well. So thanks for the time. Thanks for all you continue to do for Indiana as well.
Well, thanks for what you do, Gary. I'll tell all the business school students up there, we'll know you're a success when you merit a spot on the Gary Dick Show.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much, Mitch. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. We're a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes, more than 200 strong, and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Get ready for full throttle coverage as we shift into high gear for Business at the Brickyard, presented by LiUNA with support from the City of Westfield and Daniels Family Vineyard and Winery. We're giving you the inside track on the powerful connection between motorsports and the Indiana economy. Join us at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for exclusive interviews, behind-the-scenes access, and the stories that drive the business of motorsports. So buckle up and join us for Emmy Award-winning Business at the Brickyard coverage all month long.